Welcome. My name's Mike Gold. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Redwire and could not be more excited to unite my favorite fictional medical professional with my favorite real medical professional. As we were just talking about, I've been waiting to introduce the two of you since I met you, Jess, and with no further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Jess Bush, who's been a visual artist since childhood. In addition to the visual arts, she's done modeling, is a Saturn Award nominated actor, appearing in my favorite science fiction series and pulling off the nearly impossible feat of reviving and redefining a classic character from nearly 60 years ago. He's continuing the proud tradition of actors from this particular science fiction franchise of becoming involved in supporting real space exploration. I'm so grateful for her being here. Unfortunately, due to the SAG-AFTRA strike, I won't be mentioning that particular franchise, but we'll have a robust conversation even so. Jess, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Mike. What a lovely introduction. I feel very fluffed up and very appreciated. And I'm so grateful to be included in this conversation and welcomed into this world. So thank you for having me.
Well,
It's
we're
always a
thrilled to
pleasure.
have you. And if you think that introduces something, well, you hear what I say about JD. So
I know you're gonna
where
show me up for sure.
going to get really teary-eyed. So Dr. JD Polk is NASA's Chief Health and Medical Officer, a position he has held in 2016. Dr. Polk is the former Dean of Medicine from Des Moines University's College of Osteopathic Medicine. Prior to his work at Des Moines University College, he was the Assistant Secretary for Health Affairs and the Chief Medical Officer of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, assuming this post after serving as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Health Affairs, Deputy Chief Medical Officer. Before coming to DHS, Dr. Polk was the Chief of Space Medicine for NASA's Johnson Space Center. What the resume can't show, and believe me, we could spend the rest of the time talking about JD's resume, is just the dedication, the empathy, the care that he has for his patients. I think it's fair to say that JD has, at the very least, protected my life, if not saved my life, and that of the former administrator as well. So, JD, I can't thank you enough for all you've done for me, for NASA, and for the nation. So, thank you for joining us, JD. And would you like to describe where you are in the world, by the way, right now?
Well, first, thanks, Mike, for that glowing intro. I'm not used to that, but I am in Glasgow, Scotland, and fresh from Geneva, where we were at the United Nations meeting with a combined World Health Organization meeting on global health and space, and how space technology impacts global health. So it's a tough job. I've gone from Geneva now into Scotland. Yeah, and somebody actually pays me to do this. It's amazing.
I hope you can retire on the frequent flyer miles, JD. You deserve it. Get some golf. And I know I am very appreciative of your work internationally, that obviously it's a tough time globally with a great deal of conflict. I think space unites us in a way that nearly nothing else can. And for you and other NASA leaders to be working so hard on the Artemis Accords and bringing the world together, just really, really appreciate it. And speaking of traveling, JD, I'd just like to open up because I personally don't even know this. I'd love to hear about your journey and how you found yourself at Johnson Space Center and eventually as the Chief Medical Officer of NASA.
Well, I grew up in a more of a country boy, but we had a maybe two channels on TV at the time, and there was a science fiction show that Jess is probably familiar with that I watched that might have had an irascible doctor that I might emulate on occasion. But it was the first thought where I might maybe combine aerospace and medicine. And so I kind of tried to pursue that throughout my career. Went to medical school, then did emergency medicine residency, then moved to being the chief of life flight and flew out on a helicopter multiple times per week doing critical care and trauma, and worked in the level 1 trauma center, and was in the Air Force Reserve also doing search and rescue on a helicopter. And one of those assignments happened to be, hey, can you cover the space shuttle missions, the launches and landings in case the crew would have to bail out? And so I did. And they eventually had an opening in one of the contractor flight surgeon positions. And so I took the leap and then converted over to NASA. And I think I'm the only one that knows how to do a budget of physicians. And so they just kept promoting me just because I knew how to do a budget. So, but I just steadily kept going up the ladder. But it's been a dream job to have, and to as you mentioned, and then also in that franchise that we can't mention, that kind of look for how the future is better and space exploration. It seems like the further we get out in space exploration, the more we learn about ourselves, and so it's always been something that I've enjoyed.
And Jess, you've been doing visual arts since childhood, and
Yes.
just curious about your journey to where you are now and helping support space exploration and visual arts and acting. Was it something you always wanted to do, and how did you get here?
Yeah, I mean, so my story, yeah, I was a visual artist for the majority of my childhood and teenage years, and all the way into my mid-20s. I still am. But yeah, it kind of has always just been the way that I move through the world and the way that I process things. And so I've been lucky enough to make a career out of that. Acting came a little bit later. It was something I was always interested in, but didn't have enough space to explore it. Or I didn't allow myself this space to explore it because I wanted to stay focused on my one career. But then when I finally allowed myself the space to check that out, it kind of took over, and now I am also an actor. And I was very close to stopping acting right before I booked this big job that we are talking about, and it's completely changed my life. I did not foresee that it would open the door for me to find a whole other world of passion in the real life space industry. So that has been a wondrous surprise that keeps unfolding day to day. I would never have expected that I would be sitting in the conference room of the Kennedy Space Center speaking to you two, and having lots of thoughts about what's going on. So it's surprising to you as it is to me.
Yes, I think JD and I could say the same for getting to talk to you. So the opposite is absolutely true for what it's worth on our side.
That always blows my mind because, like, I'm just me, I'm just doing it. I'm just saying yes and moving forward. So
I'm very glad you said yes and stuck with it and moved forward on behalf of a lot of fans. You've been absolutely incredible. So we appreciate that. And Jess, because you come from the arts, I'm just curious what your view prior to the current role was of space exploration. How did you view space? Was it something that you thought about? And what was your interaction with the space field, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, honestly, not a lot. I think that my generation and the earlier generations, I think there's quite a disconnect naturally between us and space. I think that's something that I would love to help with, linking the space industry back with, humanity on Earth today, and helping people to see that link, and become engaged in it. I just didn't really connect with it. I didn't see how it affected my life on Earth. It felt abstract. It felt abstract and fantastical. So it's been an amazing experience to dismantle that idea and discover a whole world of connections. Yeah, so it's quite new, and I've just been, it's like drinking out of a fire hose.
Well, we're not going to be turning that faucet off anytime soon, so we appreciate it. JD, as Jess says, you and I come from a different generation. Curious, as you were growing up and throughout your career before coming to NASA, what was your view of space exploration, and how did it impact your life and thought process?
Well, I got to tell you, where most kids probably want to go to Disney World or some theme park, I wanted to go to Kennedy Space Center. And so I got a tour when I was pretty young, going through Kennedy Space Center, and was hitched to that idea ever since. And so but also, what was probably the most interesting for me, Mike, is, you grow up as a kid watching the Apollo astronauts and all of these folks that were your, kind of heroes that you'd watched on television and such. But then to actually treat them, because we see the astronauts until they die, and do what's called the lifetime surveillance of astronaut health, to actually see those folks that you watched growing up and be their physician, that changed the whole paradigm as well for me. It was almost surreal.
Well, they're very lucky astronauts to have you as their doctor. I can attest to that, JD. So
now I'm mostly doing the politics, and the younger flight surgeons are doing all the great, really cool stuff now, flying in T-38s and working with the astronauts. But I still get to have some fun on occasion.
Can I ask a question?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this might not be for this conversation, but I'm curious to know, if you look after an astronaut from all the way through their life, is there a physical attribute that is like common amongst astronauts after they've been to space? Like, is there something that happens?
Yeah, there's several things that occur in space. One, they, of course, are subjected to radiation, and different types of radiation, what we call galactic cosmic radiation, as well as solar radiation. There's and weightlessness, that microgravity environment, all that fluid rushes up into the head and thorax, and so they can get swelling, a little mild swelling of the brain, and changes in vision. Wow. There's changes in bone. There's all sorts of things that occur that we look to see, are those impacts lasting, or are they short term? And there's some things that we still don't know, Jess, that we're still discovering. If you have that mild intracranial pressure and swelling of the brain, and you've been up on space for 6 months, does that cause any long-term problems down the road? We know it reverses itself on the short-term side, but looking out for long-term effects for space is something that we do.
And do you think that would sorry, Mike.
No, go right ahead, yes.
Do you think that would change? Like, does it have any cognitive effects? Like, does that change people's experience of space if their brain is swelling?
Yeah, it could. I mean, certainly it doesn't change their cognitive effects right away on orbit, but we look at things, if you think about a nerve cell, if it's swollen, it's not very, very efficient at getting rid of its waste products. All cells have waste products as they energize and do their job. But if a cell doesn't get rid of its waste products very well because it's swollen, then does it accumulate things like proteins and other things that might cause things like cognitive deficit or early Alzheimer's or something down the road? So those are things that we're looking for as well.
Wow.
And JD, along those lines, as NASA executes the Artemis program, going beyond low Earth orbit, where we've been operating for a great deal of time, to the moon and Mars, what are some of the other medical issues that you expect to crop up and challenges that we'll see with the human body as we boldly go?
Well, there's a couple things. Probably one is that, for the last 65 years, we've done really intense screening of our astronauts, as you know, Mike, and it's, we had 17,000 people apply for the last astronaut selection, and we coned down to a dozen. And they get thoroughly screened. But as the commercial sector grows, they're not having maybe as rigid of a medical construct as we did. So you almost wonder sometimes, okay, were we too restrictive sometimes? You don't know where that line is. Certainly for us, we didn't want to jeopardize the taxpayers' money or the NASA's mission, or et cetera. But as the commercial sector goes, they're flying a lot of things that we didn't fly. And so it's interesting to see their experience as it goes and moves along, and the lessons learned that they have. And so the further we get out in space, the more we're going to learn. And the more people that fly in space, the more we're going to learn.
And just as important as the rockets, the transportation systems that we have, JD, it is the public support for the Artemis program. And Jess, you mentioned that growing up, relatively disconnected from space exploration. The space program is part of why we're so grateful to have you here telling the story. And just wondering, as an artist and a visual artist,
Yeah.
what do you see the role of the arts being to tell the story of space exploration and inspire a new generation?
Well, I think it's really important. I think this is why I've become so passionate about it, because of my background in the arts and this convergence of these two worlds for me. I think the arts is extremely important, and it's going to be a really great tool in allowing the wider public to see themselves in what's happening in the space industry and how it's going to impact humanity back on Earth. I think artists have a responsibility and a power to help shape the cultural story around what we're doing and the ripple effects it's going to have for us down here, because so much of it for so much of the world is going to be cultural story. Like, it will change how things happen on Earth, but people aren't going to actually be able to physically touch it. It's all like a collective myth, you know. So that's really important. And you know, in times of cultural social evolution, which I argue our expansion into space is going to be significant, or has the potential to be a significant one of those, artists have the ability to reflect ideology, but also to create it. And you know, art develops like a visual language for us to imagine new ways of being, of connecting to a sense of collective identity. And I think that power should be treated seriously and recognized, and we should be really aware of its power, because you know, it can also help us to see things that we're not so happy about. You know, like we can notice the way that things are going. I think that it's a very fragile time in space exploration, with how quickly things are moving with privatization. And so I think the arts is going to be instrumental in that, in ensuring that we're connecting to a positive shared vision. For instance, like the artwork that Jeff Koons is about to put on the moon, to me, that tells a really alarming cultural story. And learning of that artwork and that project has really ignited a kind of a ferocious passion in me to investigate what it means, and to take a kind of like a wider look at what it means for the direction that we're heading with development in the space industry. So I think the arts is extremely important, and it's not just a flourish of humanity. It's an important part of how we exist, how we grow, how we converge. You know.
Mm-hmm. So Jess, let's talk about igniting that passion.
Yeah.
As an artist, you know,
Yes.
it's tough sometimes to express what you haven't seen. Would you ever be interested in going to space if you had the opportunity? Would you go for real, Jeff?
I mean, I don't think I could say no. I think I have a problem with I'm terrible with heights. But I guess once you like get outside of gravity, it's probably not heights anymore, is it? It's just space. So maybe I'll be fine once we get up there. But yeah, I think that I would need to. I think that I would need to do that, just to understand the overview effect and to use my skills as a visual artist to help to spread that. I think that would become my life's mission.
Is the overview effect real? Like, what do you see from the astronauts that you interface with? And same question to you, JD. Would you like to go to space as well at some point? Is that an interest you've harbored or still harbor?
No, I'd like to be Jess's flight surgeon, and I'll send her to space, and I'll live vicariously through her.
Well, I'd like to think we already are with Jess, by the way, vicariously living through her space exploration. So I think we're halfway there, JD. And, you know, JD, you mentioned serving as the flight surgeon, a lot of the political work you're doing. Take me through a little bit. What is your day-to-day like these days as the chief medical officer of NASA?
Oh, wow. Well, one of our roles, as you know, is the Health and Medical Technical Authority. There are three main tech authorities: engineering, safety, and health and medical. And so a lot of what we do are looking at the human systems integration and human factors for the vehicles that we're building right now, going back to the moon, to make sure it has the right atmosphere, CO2, O2, the seats are at the right angle, all of those things that go into what we call human rating. to make sure that a spacecraft is safe for humans to be on. And that's an important feature, to know human physiology, to know the impacts of human physiology in space, to be able to write the correct standards and requirements for a vehicle to make sure that you're going to keep humans safe throughout that travel. And then, of course, planning the medical care, off Earth, and what equipment would we take with us? What medications? What are we going to plan to treat? All of those things. Then, of course, the other part of the job is making sure that the NASA workforce is healthy. We take care of the NASA workforce in general over all 10 centers, and of course, making sure the astronauts are healthy as well. But the nice part about my job is I have some extremely good people that work on all sorts of things, from whether it's the flight surgeons, biomedical engineers, the folks in radiation, human factors, etc. I'm always in awe of the talent that we bring to the table for all of these missions, and it's pretty inspiring.
And not just inspiring, but really think the technologies that we can develop through microgravity study, what we're learning on the International Space Station today, can have medical applications. So at Redwire, we were very thrilled and pleased to have manufactured the first meniscus in space. With the upcoming CRS-29 launch, we'll be launching PIL-BOX to investigate the development of new drugs and fly heart tissue that could create heart patches. Again, not just going to space for science and exploration, but to improve life to Earth, to find ways to feed the hungry and heal the sick. And I'm wondering, JD, on that aspect, are you hopeful that we can create innovations and learn lessons in space that can be applied to improve life here on Earth?
Mike, I'm going to back you up for about 30 seconds of what you said, because you said it so quickly, like it was an everyday thing. Oh, we printed a knee meniscus on orbit.
Just
you
Wednesday at
printed
Redwire.
knee meniscus on orbit. Oh, it's just an everyday occurrence now. But it's innovations like that. Think about, fast forward 15 years from now, when somebody needs a knee meniscus after their skiing injury, and we'll just spin down your stem cells, grow them, and 3D print your knee meniscus, and we'll have that ready for your surgery in a month or so. I mean, it always takes, on average, about 8 to 12 years after we do a massive innovation before it works its way to the everyday common occurrence, to where it occurs on in a hospital or something else. And so it's that's a huge big deal, though. And I gave that example at the UN this last week, and I also, we're working with the FDA on 3D printing for medication, because I can't take the entire pharmacy with me to the moon and Mars. And so, if you need an amoxil or a penicillin, maybe I can 3D print one. There's constituent chemicals, going back to your organic chemistry, where you can put those chemicals together and such. But they're really amazing innovations that are occurring very quickly, like those that Redwire is doing as well. And it's going to change the landscape for how we do things on Earth. But it's to Jess's point earlier, I don't think the average person knows all of those things, or how, we don't slap a sticker on it, right, that says, actually innovated in spaceflight, or NASA had anything to do with a particular cardiac device, or a ventilator, or other things that we've had a role in inventing. And so I think we will probably have to do a better job of getting that word out, so that people know that spaceflight does create innovation that does help life on Earth. But that's one of the values of having Jess, is that Jess and her role and her performances, I think, she brings it to somebody's living room every Thursday. People don't see me every Thursday, so it's a way for folks to see that kind of skill set, and she brings it right to their television set at home.
Well, I'll palm that credit. I'll accept your credit, but I'll also palm it off to the writers because they're the real heroes there. They're the ones that decide what gets told. So, but thank you. It's an honor. It's an absolute honor. And I will say, like, since Mike told me about the meniscus printing, like, I haven't been able to scoop my jaw off the floor, and I tell everyone that I run into, and nobody can believe it. They're like, "That sounds fake. That's insane. That's so like what? Like that is so unbelievable." Yeah, so people are just so unaware. People are just so unaware that this incredible, these leaps forward are happening now. Like it's happening now.
And it's so much more than the meniscus, of course, eventually leading to whole organs
Yeah.
and addressing what is medieval relative to organ replacement and the threats on life there. Just like, what do we do about that? Are we not doing a good job of telling the story? How do we reach, do you think, more people, particularly youth and more diverse youth? Like any suggestions for what we might do to better tell this narrative, whether through an artist purview or otherwise?
I mean, I return to like my earlier point that the arts is an essential cog in the wheel. I think that yeah, I think that's the way. I think that involving more artists in your processes and in NASA's processes and seeing it for the powerful vehicle that it is, it will really help with that. I also think just making it really about Earth, making it really clear that, like to what JD said before, that the further we go out, the further in we see, and like making it very much about Earth's problems and how space exploration can help to solve some of those things, because things on Earth at the moment are, I mean, it's complex, but things are not great, and I think that the younger generations are faced with a lot of shit, pardon my French. So they want to know how to address problems in their community and in their environments. So yeah, I think the arts and making it about Earth is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And the science fiction franchise that we're all fans of was so important, I think, in giving us hope and optimism when we were
Yeah,
young for the future, because
totally.
the world when that began was a very difficult time as well.
Yeah.
And painted a picture where we would overcome our biases and our prejudices and
Mm.
come together as a globe. And JD, you mentioned that you were talking to the United Nations and you're in Scotland now. The Artemis program, the intent is for it to be the broadest, most diverse global human spaceflight coalition in history. We're making great progress to realize that. Maybe say a word about how space exploration unites humanity and can bring us together and overcome the challenges that we're having here on Earth.
Yeah, Mike, it changes your perspective. And I'm going to paraphrase astronaut Don Thomas and Don Pettit on this. Both those astronauts I've worked with. Don Pettit, I think, has the best analogy of anyone, that where, when you first leave your hometown and you travel to the next town, when you see the sign for the city limits, you think, oh, I'm home. And then as you travel further and you travel out of state, it's when you see the state sign and you think, oh, I'm home. And then as you travel to another country, it's when you land back in your home country, you think, oh, I'm home. And Don Pettit said when they came back after Expedition 6 and he landed back on Earth, he thought, oh, I'm home. It was now being on Earth was home. And I think that perspective, the further you get out, changes greatly. And so even at the United Nations, when we're talking about spaceflight, as we get to Mars and beyond, we're not talking about going as a country. We're not even talking about going as governments. We're talking about going as a planet to different planets with multiple different nations, commercial, public-private partnerships, et cetera. It starts to take on a role where we as a species are going to do exploration. And that's probably a unique change and shift and that perspective. And I think it has to do with the further you get out, just kind of like when you finally eventually leave your city limits.
And yes, you're already pretty far from home as a native Australian here in the US, and you've gotten exposure to the global phenomena of science fiction franchises and the space exploration world. What's your feeling in terms of the global response to space exploration and the space narrative as well?
Uh, say that again. Could you repeat the question?
Just wondering, as an Australian here in
Yes.
the US, and you've seen the global phenomena of both science fiction and of space exploration.
Yeah.
Do you see that uniting people, different cultures? What's been your experience with the global response as well?
Yeah. Look, from my research, since I met you the first time, Mike, I've been on a warpath of, well, not a warpath, but just a very focused path of research and reading. And I don't think that it's a given that it will. I think that we're at an inflection point that could either go towards greater disparity and competition, or if we're intentional about it, it could lead to greater unity and real equality and a uniting of people as a connected one. And I think that we need to be very intentional about how we move in this delicate beginning as to what the result is going to be.
Yes, thank you for all you've done to direct our journey on the screen and through your arts and the inspiration. Thank you both for this wonderful conversation. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, JD. Great to meet you.
Great to meet you as well, Jess. Safe travels.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.